I wanted to talk about the police. That's going to wrap into everything else we're going to talk about. All the other videos that I'm going to make, lots of it is going to cover la policía, the police. Police, like women, can't live with them, can't live without them. I'm memeing. The police, at least in this country, suck. And they suck very hard. And they've sucked for a very, very long time, especially in lower income communities, especially in communities of color. It's time to change our criminal justice system. It really is. We have one of the worst criminal justice systems by the numbers of all of our sister nations. The idea of American exceptionalism goes right out the window once we start talking about our criminal justice system, once we start talking about incarceration, once we start talking about law enforcement and community outreach and community building. In this country, we are absolutely miserable at it. And the police suck. The police are at the forefront of this problem. But the thing is, we can't just remove the police. I mean, what are we going to do without any police whatsoever? I mean, what? I mean, something's going to come in and hop into that power vacuum and do some real damage. We need the police. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we should demand them to be better. Because we rely on them to help us protect our communities and keep them safe. If that's the case, then they have every right and they have every obligation from here to this world or the next to be as good as they can be. And for right now, they're very close to being as bad as they can be. And that's very, very sad. One of the big problems with the police right now is their budgets. Police budgets are, law enforcement budgets, police department budgets have been a big thing in this country all the way back to the 80s is what we're going to talk about for modern day policing. The crime bill, the large amount of crime in the 90s, lots of heavy policing, and poor, low income and marginalized communities have left their mark that we see, still today. Police budgets have always in this country, at least for a while, have taken a large portion of the budgets from municipalities. I mean, we can just look at NYC, New York City. New York City has a budget of $90 million, at least for year 2020. They're going to have a budget of $90 million. That's a lot of money. And of that 90 million, over 6%, I believe about 7 or 8% of that is going to go to the NYPD. The police department is going to get $6 million, over 6% of the budget. That's a lot of money. It's so much money, in fact. It's actually more money than health, homelessness, youth development, and workforce development combined in New York City. And where's New York crime right now? New York crime is way down from where it used to be, especially in the 90s. Walking the streets of New York City is going to be way safer for you than it was a while ago. And the New York City, the NYPD's budget is about still the same, adjusted for inflation, a little over 6% of the budget. Why? I don't know about you, but when crime goes down, honestly, it sounds like a good time to free up some of that money to do something else with it. I mean, what are the police doing with it? What are the police doing with it? Not great things, but we're going to get back to that. And the sad thing is that crime rates are lower, but ever since the 1970s, our incarceration rates have skyrocketed. They've increased, actually. Crime rates have been lowering, but incarceration is going up. Right now, we have the largest prison population of any country in the world. Right now, by having 5% of the world's population, we have over 25% of the world's prison population. We love throwing people in jail. We love it. It's a national pastime. It's like baseball. Only people don't watch baseball anymore, and people sure are still going to jail. And that's for a lot of different reasons. But one of the biggest reasons that I think personally are broken windows laws, sometimes called proactive policing, sometimes called, how I'm going to refer to it here, over policing. And over policing is an idea that, a very simple idea, and it makes a lot of sense. Thinking from a top-down perspective, as like a municipality, as like a sheriff, as like a police department, it makes a lot of sense. Honestly, you have a community that's having a lot of crime. What do? You want to allocate more resources there to bring the crime down. You're the law enforcement, right? Let's go enforce some laws. You send a bunch of people over there. You send a bunch of cops over there, and you arrest a bunch of people. Now, what does this do to the community, right? Studies have been shown on this. What happens if you take a community and you have a pretty normal police rate? You keep it about the same, a little low. You have a cop rolling by every once in a while, and you have a heavy police presence on the street. You introduce proactive policing, or broken windows policy, which is the idea that, if you have a community with broken windows everywhere, it's a pretty trash, rundown looking community, people are more likely to commit more crime there because, who cares? It's the idea, you walk into a really clean neighborhood and there's no trash on the ground anywhere, you're less likely to know trash on the ground. If you walk into a community and there's trash everywhere, you're more likely who cares? Just throw the trash. What that did is it brought over policing to these communities. It really they really cracked down on minor crimes, on minor infractions. You're in there, you're catching a lot of crime. And the thing is, you're not just catching a lot of crime, you're taking a lot of people out of that community. And the studies have shown that as you take people out of that community, as you over police them, the crime rate goes up, not down. You put more resources into a community, you put more police into a community that's having problems, the crime rate goes up and not down. And that's really sad. And it's a vicious cycle, because once the crime rate goes up again, once you see the crime rate goes up again, you want to put more police in, and the crime rate goes up again. It's tearing these communities apart. And not only is it tearing these communities apart, it's ruining our country and our democracy as a whole, because so many people, for almost all people, police are their first contact with the government, especially the federal government, as their first and maybe even only contact with the federal government. The idea of the Fed is just like this overreaching, massive umbrella that's untouchable by your average citizen. I mean, I'm probably not going to experience anything related to the federal government anytime soon, hopefully, unless they finally catch me for tax evasion. Yeah. Like Shaggy. Police officers are people's first contact with the government. And police trust is at an all-time low. About 1/3 of people, especially in lower income communities, trust the police. Wouldn't be scared to call the police in their time of need, right? And we see this a lot. With police departments struggling with people calling on them when things go wrong. It's so hard for them to finish cases because, let's say there's a gang shooting in a community, right? And people see what goes on. They don't go to the police. They don't want to. They feel endangered by the police. Instead of being the protectors and the law enforcement there to help you, protect your community, to guide your community, to be there to help you, people don't see them as that. They're an outside sort of alien force there to hurt you. And because of that, people are not going to the police. They're not talking to the police. They're not helping the police out with cases. And that being said, it's harder for the police to do their job. And then they allocate more resources, and then they over-police again. And like I said, the vicious cycle continues. People don't trust the police. And that's a very, very big problem. And that trickles down into people not trusting the government, since the police are people's first contact with the government. And like any first impression, it's going to stick with people. If you make a bad first impression, people won't like you. And people's trust with the government goes down with lower income communities the same way people's trust of the police goes down. You shouldn't have to be scared to call the police. They're protect and serve, right? You shouldn't be scared to have to call the police or have to call the police. You shouldn't be scared to interact with the police officers. Minorities in this country and lower income people are far more likely to be scared to interact with the police for fear of any actions or things that they say being misconstrued as damning against them, and aggressive actions being taken against them. This is true. And why would you want to call the police? Why would you want to trust the police if you have a great feeling that whatever you say and do will be used against you in a court of law? We already know that black people specifically are more likely to get arrested for the same crime, more likely to get a higher sentence for the same crime, and a steeper punishment for the same crime, more likely to get prison sentence for the same crime, and more likely to get a higher prison sentence for the same crime. And if you know all that, you'll think twice about picking up the phone when something's going down in your community. You'll think twice about talking to that police officer when they're trying to look to collect information about a crime that happened. And that tears communities apart because the people who are enforcing the laws, the people who are there to protect and serve, aren't a part of that community. They're not. They're just kind of, like I said, aliens kind of walking around that just exist in it. That doesn't help anybody, you know. And the unarmed and police with their unarmed killing of people, especially black people, makes it very hard for people to trust the police. It's a very deep antagonism that's going to be very, very hard to change, and that's why we need to take such drastic measures to fix it. And you see, you know, the conservatives with their gun rights protests, you know, their beautiful gun rights protests, bringing their AR style rifles down to the city hall to talk about how terrible it is for the government to make sure that everyone should have a background check before they're able to buy a weapon specifically made to kill and maim other human beings. Where's that energy when the police overstep their bounds? Where's that same energy when the police conduct illegal searches and seizures? Where's that same energy when people who are illegally carrying, or people are perceived to have weapons, are seen as more dangerous? Where is that? They don't care. And that's really sad. And they don't care, I think, is one big problem in this country. Apathy is a really big problem, especially when it comes to voting. But apathy is a really big problem. But I think hate is an even bigger problem, or misunderstanding. This comes back to the culture that we have around our law enforcement here in America. We have a very unhealthy relationship with our government. Like conservatives will cry night and day about background checks or waiting periods, and say one more step against the Second Amendment, and they're going to go down to their local USPS and shoot it up, because the government is bad. That being said, we have a very unhealthy relationship with our government, and now we have a very unhealthy relationship, trickle down, with our law enforcement and the way we punish people for breaking the law. I think we have a super unhealthy a way of thinking of prison time, of thinking of punishments, because we think of it through the lens of punishment. That's the big thing that I think. We think of this in the way of punishment. We hold that against people, maybe even hypocritically in many cases. We don't give people second chances like we ought to. And we see a lot of our law enforcement as just punishment, as punitive punishment, to hurt people, get back at people, an eye for an eye. Instead of seeing law enforcement as rehabilitating people. That's why our recidivism rates are so bad. That's why people were so angry when Bernie came out and said that all people should vote. Voting should be a human right. No matter what you've done, no matter where you are, if you're an American citizen, you should be able to vote. It's a human right. I believe that as well. That's why people got so mad and they went straight to the Boston bomber comparison. Oh, you think the Boston bomber should be able to vote? Well, I mean, I want less Boston bombers. I hope everybody does as well. I don't want that to happen again. And I don't want people to commit more crimes. And if we have something that's been proven to help people feel like they're still part of a community, feel like they're still not alienated from the outside world, to feel like they're still a part of this country, and it helps them not make any more, not do any more crimes, why shouldn't we go with that? What's the reason that people are so against that? What's the reason why people feel so inclined to think about law enforcement and jail time and how we treat people who commit crimes so harshly? It's because we think of it not as rehabilitating to put them back in the community to be productive members of society. We think of it as punishing people, to hurt them, to get back at them for the things that they've done against the community, which leads to people feeling alienated from the community. We already know that people who go to jail, when they're taken from their families, we'll use dads who are taken from their families. You know, we all know that single motherhood and single parenthood in general is a big issue in this country. It's one of the leading reasons why people will go commit crimes. When they come out of jail, it's so unlikely for them to reconnect with the family that they've lost. It doesn't happen very often. They don't feel like people anymore because we don't treat them like people. And that's a really big problem. This culture of punishment and disenfranchisement that we have in this country is juxtaposed with what we see in our sister nations. Let's take Sweden as an example, who has a really big culture of reenfranchisement, of putting people back into the communities that they were taken out from because of the crimes that they committed. And they see their recidivism rates drop drastically. They're doing way better than us. One of those problems is why there's no like drive in the places where we would think that crime dropping would be a good thing in the police department, is because of for-profit policing, because of for-profit prisons. That's one massive issue, and that's one reason why I think Biden, that's just another check-in why in the box of why I think Biden is 100% better than Trump to take the lead here, because he wants to abolish private prisons that make money off of keeping people in jail. Do you really think that if you make money off of keeping people in jail, that you'd be for reform that keeps people out of jail? I want everybody to think on that for a second. Also, what's up, Cupid? True, it does not overwrite the countless people locked up for non-violent offenses for years, 3-strike laws, things like that. We just punish people. That's it. We just want to punish people and not put people back into their communities. We couldn't care less about putting people back in their communities, and then we bitch and moan when it doesn't work out and they commit more crimes and have to sit back in jail again. And this is really sad because we've seen what in a country that's so conservative as the US, and no matter what anybody wants to say, the US is still pretty conservative. Actually, we've come a long way, but it's still pretty conservative in its heart. People scoff at the idea of things that have been proven to stop people from going to jail, right? We can talk about recreation for one. Why is it that people in lower income communities commit more crime, especially younger people? Compare that to their suburban counterparts. You know, I feel like I grew up pretty privileged. I grew up in pretty good neighborhoods. I grew up in pretty good schools. There are lots of things for me to do outside of school besides sell drugs and shoot people. You know, there's lots and lots of things for me to do outside of school besides sell drugs and shoot people. I was on the football team. We had a very well-funded sports team. We had a very well-funded activity team. Activity clubs. Chess club was a big thing. Lacrosse, soccer. I mean, we even had a gaming club when I was in high school. We even had a gaming club. Really, it's pretty cool. It taught a lot of things about how to work within a team and trust your teammates. It's very nice. Do they have that in lower income communities? Do they really? I don't think they do. Yeah, gaming clubs are super cool. Yeah, like the idea that we just like swoop a bunch of people and scoop them off the street, keep them in a box for a couple years where they're disconnected from their community and their and like general society, and then throw them back out with no money or anything else to keep them from committing the crimes that they did in the first place is going to work is absolutely ridiculous and asinine and stupid. And I feel like a lot of people just don't care. And the people who do care about that are the ones who profit from that system in the first place. We need to work on our police. We need to defund. We need to restart. And Minnesota and New York are going to be good examples of places doing that. New York City is defunding their police. They're cutting that $6 million budget and putting it into mental health. They're putting it into community building. They're putting it into community policing. They're putting that into recreation, things to keep people off the street. What's better than that? And it already has opposition. It's very sad. We need to restart. There's so much culture within so many police departments keeping people fixed to the idea of not policing the police. Who polices the police? That's something that's in the Supreme Court right now. Hopefully we're going to talk about that soon. That's a very important question. And the answer is themselves. And when they don't want to find a crime, they don't. Police have way too much money. Way too much money. On average, I think we spend about 4% of our GDP on police, about the same as it was in the 1970s, but what's dropped? So the police budgets have stayed the same. What's dropped? Crime. Crime's dropped dramatically. Crime is nowhere near what it used to be in the 80s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, but the budgets are the same. And what's not being funded? Mental health. What's not being funded? Community building. What's not being funded? Community cohesion initiatives, recreation. These things are being thrown by the wayside. And this is why we really need to defund and put some of that money that was used for punishing people and used it for keeping people out of being punished in the first place. I have a question for you all. What is most of police work? Because most of police work isn't diving over a barrel and gunning down some bank robber or anything. You know, some kleptomaniac. That's not most of police work. Most of police work is going to social civil calls, going to when you and your neighbor have a dispute on who rented whose lawnmower, going to domestic disputes between people fighting in the apartment over, and you hear them yelling at each other. That's what police goes to. Why do we send people with guns to go deal with those situations? So the majority of police officers, the vast majority of police officers, will never fire their weapon, or very seldomly fire their weapon, or even more seldomly draw their weapon even while on duty. It just doesn't happen that much. It really doesn't. I mean, less than 100 police officers even die on the line of duty every year. You want to see more citizen action laws to allow citizens to check up on police stations and report them? Oh, 100%. We're not. I didn't plan to talk about it today, but there was some. I'm not sure if you saw it, but there was like a police officer down in Florida, in Miami. He just like threw some woman's head down who was sitting. She was protesting, and it found out that guy actually had 79 complaints against him in 4 years. Listen, okay, I don't know where you all work. But if I was sent to HR 79 times in 4 years, I wouldn't be working at that place at the end of those 4 years. I don't know about you all, but I definitely, if I'm sent to HR 79 times in 4 years, I'm definitely not going to be working there anymore. I don't know about you guys, but they get away with it. Who polices the police? We should be sending more mental health professionals. We should be sending more social service workers. We should be sending more of those people to handle this work. I think a lot of police feel super stressed, and I won't lie, their job is extremely hard. It shouldn't be that hard. They're shouldered with so many things to do, and they're not even properly trained for it. Police spend more time at the gun range than they do dealing with interpersonal skills in classes, how to de-escalate violent situations, on classes how to relate to people, on classes how to help ameliorate problems, to mediate. They don't know how to do that. They spend more time shooting than they do how to deal with this, and that's what most of their work is. We should send more people in less visible roles, part of the community, without guns, and more training on how to deal with these sorts of real situations that are happening in these communities that police really shouldn't have to deal with there. And that's going to build a lot more of social cohesion and keep police out of these situations and keep them on to more important things to do. Yeah, the pie chart of city funding is pretty garbage. I mean, we talked about this earlier. New York's police department gets more money than mental health, human resources, and community building combined. It's really sad. We need to reinvest those funds into communities. We need less correctional facilities and more recreational facilities to help keep people off the street, because that's where it starts, really. We need real change. All right. So that was good, wasn't it? Wasn't that fun? Wasn't that really fun? Hope everybody had fun. Well, it can help. We can assign city liaisons to coordinate with community building groups to establish community organization efforts. That'd be great. That'd be really nice. Can you imagine, instead of police prowling the streets, it was mental health service workers, social service workers, people trained to de-escalate, de-escalate domestic disputes, things like that, help mediate neighbor differences, things like that. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be sick? Instead of having a random police officer who's spent more time shooting his gun than dealing with these issues at the department. Wouldn't that be sick? That'd be great. I think it'd be build a way more trust within communities to be doing that than anything else.